The U.S. action is a blockade of Iran's ports and coastline, not a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Enforcement will occur inside Iran's territorial seas and in international waters. Let me be clear, this blockade applies to all ships, regardless of nationality, heading into or from Iranian ports.
Was U.S. caught lying about zero ships crossing freely and desperately rewriting the Hormuz blockade narrative? After failing spectacularly for 4 straight days, U.S. military abruptly claims they were never actually blocking the Hormuz Strait. Trump offers a new flimsy excuse after Iran-linked ships and massive supertankers filmed sailing unimpeded through the strategic strait. On day 4 of the U.S. naval blockade on Iranian ports, the American military appeared to refine its public narrative, offering a more detailed account of enforcement than earlier statements. U.S. military officials claimed that 14 vessels had been turned around within the first 72 hours of the blockade, according to briefings on April 16. The vessels reportedly chose to turn back rather than risk a direct confrontation with U.S. naval forces, indicating that at least some ships are complying with the warnings. The U.S. military has insisted that the blockade targets ships entering or exiting Iranian ports, not the entire Strait of Hormuz waterway, in an attempt to clarify the operational scope. However, President Trump on April 15 had publicly described the measure as a Hormuz blockade, and had even suggested that the strait would be open for Chinese ships, complicating the messaging. Washington has maintained that the blockade is directed at all merchant vessels, regardless of flag, that are traveling to or from Iranian ports in the Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, confirmed that these operations could extend beyond the immediate Gulf region. Kane stated that U.S. forces, including elements as far away as the Pacific, would be prepared to pursue and, if necessary, intercept Iran-flagged ships in other maritime zones.
On Monday, 13 April, at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, at the direction of the President, America's Joint Force began implementing a blockade against Iran under the leadership of Admiral Cooper and the team at CENTCOM. Let me be clear, this blockade applies to all ships, regardless of nationality, heading into or from Iranian ports. As of this morning, U.S. Central Command has not been required to board any particular ships. And I'll remind you that we are also conducting similar maritime interdiction actions and activities in the Pacific AOR against those ships that left that area before we began the blockade. The U.S. action is a blockade of Iran's ports and coastline, not a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Enforcement will occur inside Iran's territorial seas and in international waters.
Under the new enforcement rules, U.S. forces are authorized to board, search, and where legal grounds exist, seize cargo from merchant vessels linked to Iranian trade. The operation currently involves around 10,000 U.S. service members deployed across multiple regions and tasked with enforcing the naval cordon. At the same Pentagon-style briefing, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth warned Iran to choose wisely and come to terms with Washington's conditions, framing the blockade as leverage in ongoing negotiations.
We are reloading with more power than ever before, and better intelligence, even more importantly, better intelligence than ever before, as you expose yourself with your movement to our watchful eye. We are locked and loaded on your critical dual-use infrastructure, on your remaining power generation, and on your energy industry. We'd rather not have to do it, but we're ready to go at the command of our president and at the push of a button.
While the U.S. military projected confidence and control over the Strait of Hormuz, real-time shipping data painted a more complex picture of partial compliance and leaks in the blockade. U.S. Military Central Command stated that 0 ships had successfully broken through the blockade since it went into effect on April 13, emphasizing strict enforcement. Central Command also said that at least 10 ships have been intercepted or redirected since the blockade began on April 13, highlighting the scale of monitoring operations. However, another U.S.-sanctioned supertanker entered the Persian Gulf on April 15, according to Reuters, raising questions about the effectiveness of the blockade. Iran's state-linked fast news agency reported that an empty Very Large Crude Carrier, or VLCC, had entered the Gulf, underscoring continued tanker movement despite the restrictions. Data from CPLR and LSEG also confirmed that this specific ship, capable of carrying around 2 million barrels of crude, had indeed entered the Persian Gulf waterway. FARS reported that the supertanker had crossed the Strait of Hormuz en route toward the Iranian port of Imam Khomeini, pointing to a direct route into Iran's export infrastructure. Iranian reports did not reveal the name of the vessel or the exact destination beyond the Gulf, according to Reuters, leaving some details opaque. This incident came after the earlier passage of the sanctioned tanker Alicia, which was reportedly heading toward an Iraqi port in a move that already tested the blockade's reach. Satellite imagery and tracking data from tankertrackers.com suggested that several more ships may have evaded the US blockade and navigated the narrow waterway successfully. April 14 data showed that at least 3 ships sailing from Iranian ports had crossed the Strait of Hormuz, adding to evidence of ongoing maritime traffic. Those 3 vessels were part of a larger group of 7 ships that have been recorded crossing the Strait of Hormuz since the US blockade first began. However, some vessels that initially took the Hormuz route later turned back, as reported by the Times of Israel, indicating both caution and tactical maneuvering. In a reciprocal move, Iran has decided to halt all petrochemical exports, a step that could affect global supply chains. This decision comes amid the ongoing US naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz announced by President Donald Trump. Iran's national petrochemical company has instructed firms to suspend exports until further notice is issued. According to Fast News, Iran exports nearly 29 million tons of petrochemical products annually, valued at around $13 billion. Reports indicate that Tehran is now prioritizing domestic availability of petrochemical products over international shipments. The export suspension is also aimed at preventing shortages of raw materials within the country's industrial sector. Additionally, disruptions caused by Israeli strikes on key petrochemical hubs have contributed to this decision. Despite these developments, domestic prices for petrochemical products in Iran have reportedly remained stable. This stability persists even after attacks on major facilities such as Asaluya and Mahaha.